And joining us now to discuss this further is Mr. Adam Schwarz. He's a political commentator from London to speak on EU-UK relations. Mr. Schwarz, thank you for joining us. To start off, what is the current status of trade negotiations between the UK and the EU? Is there an end in sight, and are you or others in the UK becoming irritated by the length of the time this is taking?
Well, just to deal with your last question first, I think talks have gone on for considerably longer, really, than even analysts predicted. I think really the second week of November was viewed as the very, very last week, only a month ago, in which talks could really go on until, just due to the fact that the deal will have to go through the European Parliament, European National Parliament, as well as the UK Parliament as well. So things are looking better than they were around a month ago when the UK told the EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, not to bother coming to the UK. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, London sort of changed its mind. They said actually things seem to have shifted on the EU side. And so they asked Michel Barnier to come back to negotiate. But as you mentioned, talks are really still stuck on two main issues, which they have been for months now, which is fisheries, competition, as well as governance issues. That really has kind of arisen since the UK's internal market bill was introduced to Parliament, with the UK's threats to unilaterally break the Brexit withdrawal agreement, which it's currently in. So I think there is a deal that's pretty much taken shape. We're really just waiting for those two main issues to back down now. But I really suspect any major movement to happen in the next couple of weeks now, because we really are at the end of the period in which really a deal can be negotiated, because we're only around 6 weeks or so before that deal is supposedly meant to be implemented.
So there are rumors of Boris Johnson's advisor, Dominic Cummings, forthcoming departure from government. Is this a good thing, or how might you think it might impact the UK government policy? Would it impact the UK's approach to a trade deal with the EU?
Well, I think it's really one of the clearest signs, actually, of movement on the UK side in terms of how it's willing to approach negotiations. The narrative and the talk really has been very similar, as it has been for several months. But I'd say one of the key indicators is this ongoing civil war within Number 10 at the moment. Lee Kane, who's part of the kind of Dominic Cummings Vote Leave faction, which are kind of viewed as the Brexit hawk kind of faction of advisors, announced that he was departing as the Number 10 Director of Communications earlier this week. And now, as you said, late last night, we found out that Dominic Cummings will be leaving by 25th of December of this year. So I think it's sometimes unclear to understand, what the issues are around disputes between advisors. But considering they both are part of this kind of Vote Leave Brexit faction, I think to some extent that does indicate that the UK may be willing to concede on some of the major issues that have been holding up Brexit talks. And I think really, one of the major issues that's come up in the last couple of weeks has been, of course, the outcome of the US election. President Biden has a significantly different view towards Britain and Brexit than President Trump. And I think that's really focused minds in London towards making sure that they get that, the UK-EU trade deal. So I think overall, their departure is ultimately a victory for perhaps a more pragmatic view of Brexit and trade negotiations going forward.
Now, provided Trump's legal challenges to the U.S. election outcome are stopped in their tracks, what will be the effect upon the UK's trade deal position of Biden entering the White House?
Well, I think there are two major consequences. I think the first is, in fact, incentivizing a deal between the UK and the EU. The UK has made very clear that it really wants a post-Brexit trade deal with the US. And I think that's significantly more likely to happen if the UK has, in fact, concluded its kind of trading relationship with the EU. And say President-elect Biden is very pro-EU and he's also very pro-Ireland. stemming from his Irish heritage. And I think what he doesn't want to see is the peace process and the Good Friday Agreement compromised in Northern Ireland. So I think it incentivizes a deal from that side, but I think it also very much disincentivizes a no-deal exit out of the current withdrawal agreement, because President Biden has made very clear that there will be no US-UK trade deal if there is any kind of major disruption caused by Brexit. So I think those really are the two major impacts. And I think, Johnson, during the Trump era, very much viewed a US trade deal as a way in which some of the damage could be mitigated that followed from any kind of no-deal exit from the EU. But the reality is that a US-UK trade deal would really only add expected about 0.16% to GP. And so the reality is actually, in fact, a US trade deal would not compensate for any kind of lack of a formal trading relationship between the US and the UK.
All right, so my last question is to you. In hindsight, looking back, regardless of what side you're on, whether you were for leave or for stay, do you think people, even on the leave side, are perhaps feeling regretful of the decision, considering how long and drawn out this process has been, how frustrating it's been, and then also considering the fact that with the changes happening in the U.S. also, with Trump going out of power, Biden coming in, the tide is sort of shifting from isolationist kind of policies and going more towards global integration. Do you think even the people on the side of leave would have rather gone for stay if they had known it was going to be such a frustrating and long process?
Well, I think the polls indicate that actually around a fifth of leave voters, roughly would have changed their mind if they were to vote again. And I think that is a product of the kind of chaos of the last 4 years or so, where we've seen, 3 different prime ministers essentially during that period, or what is normally actually a very politically stable country. And one of the issues is that, in fact, we haven't seen any formal changes, either politically or kind of economically at the moment, with the UK's relationship with the EU, even though we're officially out of the EU. And actually, I think when you might see major changes is actually when some of those economic impacts do become apparent, after the transition period ends. Because even if we do get a deal, there's still going to be major disruption to the UK economy in terms of import and export declarations, in terms of trying to manage some of the legal requirements around change in the relationship. So I think actually as soon as things change economically, there may be a significant shift, certainly from, to some extent, leave voters. In terms of your other question, in terms of shifting from a more isolationist to a sort of more cohesive and open view of world trade, I think what we have really seen since 2016 is a move towards isolationism, with obviously Brexit and Trump being elected in that year. And what we're seeing at the moment is, with the failure of populists really to manage the consequences of the pandemic, actually they are very much struggling to do that. And I think what we are seeing is the people who are taking their place are in fact those more liberal, more kind of open, more cooperative people like President Biden. Of course, in the UK, we're still waiting several more years until 2024 for the next election. So it may take several years before, there are kind of major changes from that perspective. But I think overall, we are moving in that direction. I think, in times of struggle, particularly economic struggle in the world, sometimes, the immediate reaction is to withdraw from the world and try to protect yourself. But I think in the very globalized world where everything is kind of interconnected and, really the survival and flourishment of economies depends on international cooperation, I think we really have to be moving towards that direction with more economic cooperation and, of course, health cooperation and cooperation in other areas.
That's a very interesting perspective. Mr. Adam Schwarz, thank you so much for speaking to us and giving your analysis. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.